acomodarse. Bueno, estamos llegando también al último segmento del día de hoy, donde Dr. Wayne Holmes, del Instituto de Educación de University College London, uno de los autores de la publicación para UNESCO AI and Education Guidance for Policymakers, hablará de este texto que ofrece orientación a los responsables de las formulaciones de políticas para comprender la inteligencia artificial y responder a los desafíos y oportunidades en educación que presenta. Específicamente, se va a referir a los elementos esenciales de esta rama, junto a delinear prácticas emergentes y la evaluación de riesgo y beneficios para garantizar la inclusión y la equidad.
Hello, my name is Wayne Holmes. I'm from University College London, and I'm here to speak about artificial intelligence and education. So if you'll just give me a moment, I will share my screen. So I'd like to start by thanking the Connector Educar organizers for the very kind invitation for me to join you in this event. I'd like to also thank all of you for allowing me to speak in English. To introduce myself, I'm a learning scientist, and I've been involved in AI and education for about 10 years. So to begin with, what AI can achieve is pretty amazing. From beating the world's best player at Go, to automatically identifying diabetes from retinal scans and autonomous cars, which is why I have huge respect for AI researchers. AI also brings some amazing possibilities to education. There are many people who'll tell you all about those exciting things, if only because AI in education is already a $6 billion market. But I'm not going to do that. In fact, you might think I'm sometimes a bit negative because I see my role as bringing a critical studies perspective, thinking about the very many challenges and trying to get behind the hyperbole. So the connections between AI and education are actually more complex than many suggest, and there is a lot of hype and exaggeration. I'm first going to explore some of the connections in terms of three categories or buckets. Like any category system, my buckets overlap, but I still think this categorization is helpful. So here are my three buckets. We have learning with AI, learning about AI, and preparing for AI. I'm going to start with learning with AI and start with system supporting. So system supporting AI are things that automate aspects of school and university administration, things like recruitment, admissions, timetabling, attendance recording, and so on and so forth. But to be honest, these are not my area of interest. I'm more interested in the student supporting, and there are many different types. To begin with, we have the intelligent tutoring systems. And this is a device that enables the student, gives them some information, a quiz, an activity, and then depending on what the student does, they give them new activities, new information, and takes them through their own individualized pathway. The list on the right are companies around the world, many of which are multi-million-dollar funded. So they're the most typical, but then we have things like dialogue-based tutoring systems. These use a Socratic conversational approach to guiding the learner through the material to be learned. And then there's automatic writing evaluation, mostly for formative assessment, but increasingly for summative assessment. Then there's what I call learning network orchestrators, which use AI to connect people together, like Smart Learning Partner from Beijing in China. With this system, if a student hasn't understood something in their classroom, they call up the app, type in what they want to know, and the app connects them with a list of human tutors, all rated by other students, much like a dating app. And then they get 20 minutes of one-to-one human tuition. Then there's language learning apps, which are similar to the so-called intelligent tutoring systems, but they have natural language processing to check the student's choice of words and pronunciation. And finally, chatbots, which are increasingly being used in education to provide immediate support to students, mostly about practical things such as where is my next class? So that's some examples of student supporting AI tools. What about teacher supporting AI tools? Well, currently, there's very little AI that's genuinely designed to support teachers. I've only come across a few, and they're all involved in curating resources. Firstly, there's X5Gone, which uses AI to scrape the internet to find the most appropriate open education resources for teachers to use in their teaching to match exactly what they want their students to learn. Then there's this one from IBM, which also helps teachers find appropriate online resources. And then there's Clever Owl from Lebanon. But that's about all the AI tools specifically designed to support teachers that I've been able to find, rather than AI tools designed to support students, which by definition effectively replace teacher functions. So that's learning with AI. What about learning about AI? There are a lot of initiatives around the world. For example, at UNESCO, we're working on a range of projects, including mapping AI curricula from around the world, including Chile, but there are surprisingly few. As well as we're curating and providing links to resources that teachers can use to help their students learn about AI. Meanwhile, in the United States, there's AI for K-12 initiative, which is developing a curriculum for US schools based on 5 what they call big ideas: perception, representation, learning, natural interaction, and societal impact. Meanwhile, universities around the world have been offering AI-related courses for many years, covering everything from machine learning to coding and data science. And for ordinary citizens, there are resources like this one, which is Elements of AI from Finland. So in summary, this bucket, learning about AI, is pretty well developed. However, what about learning, preparing for AI? I'm talking about preparing everyone for the impact of AI on humanity. How do we deal with the AI hype, the AI biases, the fake news, and the impact on privacy and on jobs? Around the world, many researchers are now focusing on the impact of AI on people, such as the AI Now Institute in New York. But now we need to extend this to help everyone, all students and all citizens, understand and be able to deal with these growing issues, how to get through the hype. Now, you might think that this bucket, preparing for AI, should be part of the previous bucket, learning about AI, and I'd agree. For me, preparing for AI should be integrated within every learning about AI course, with the human aspects interwoven with the technology aspects, not just left to the end as a tick box exercise. So what are these hypes and exaggerations? Well, let's start with AI in general. In fact, like any innovation, with AI, there's often more hype and more myths than reality. For example, AI isn't always as smart as many claim. When I show you this and ask you what you recognize, I bet most of you instantly said, it's a panda. And the AI system that was used with this agrees with 57.7% confidence. But what happens when we mix this image of the panda with this noise? Well, we end up with this. Now, again, you as humans will look at this and you'll still think it's a panda. And now the AI is 99.3% confident. Unfortunately, confident that it's a gibbon. Not only that, AI needs people. A human chooses and cleans the data. A human labels the data, like in these factory scenarios in places like Kenya, where the person's job is to go through frame by frame of videos and draw around them and label them. Here's a car, here's a person, here's a car. A human designs the network. A human trains the network. A human creates the outputs and, most importantly, makes the value judgments. AI can't do any of that. Meanwhile, we were told that AI was going to bring huge benefits to tackle the COVID pandemic. But the reality is that AI has contributed very little. Of 2,000 plus studies, none of the models identified are of potential use. And that's just one meta-analysis. I know of others that say a similar thing. And not just for COVID, but also for things like detecting breast cancers, where again, the AI has not fulfilled what was promised. And how does this play out in education? To begin with, what are the claims made by the many AI in education companies, and how do they stand up? First, many claim that their AI education tools are intelligent, but they're not. Machine learning in AI, which is the dominant approach, is about statistics and pattern finding in data. No AI system today comes anywhere close to human intelligence, and no AI education tool is anywhere near as intelligent as a human teacher. AI systems in education are extremely limited in what they can achieve. Sometimes they might appear intelligent, but that's a long way from actually being intelligent. It's all smoke and mirrors, and we mustn't allow ourselves to be fooled. Another claim is that these AI tools will save teacher time. But that claim has been made about education technologies for almost 100 years, and it's never happened. Of course, AI, we're told, is different. And AI tools will finally save teacher time. I know that most teachers would love a tool that takes care of their marking. I would. But this ignores how much a teacher learns about their students when they read what the student has written, insights that no dashboard will ever give. In any case, no AI system is capable of the depth of interpretation or accuracy of analysis that a teacher can give. So maybe AI will save teacher time, although there's no evidence for that. But at what cost to the quality of teaching and learning? And if it does save teacher time, with a focus on efficiency, which is not a word I find comfortable in education, what will the impact be on teacher jobs? And what about personalization? This is something we hear about all the time. It's an ambition that's been around again for almost 100 years, which has re-emerged most recently from Silicon Valley. If we can have personalized recommendations on Netflix, why can't we do that in education? Indeed, Pearson, one of the biggest education companies in the world, is trying to rebrand itself as the Netflix of education. But this completely misses the point. The AI tools might provide each student with their own individual pathway through the materials, but they still take them to the same fixed learning outcomes as everyone else. For me, this is a weak understanding of personalization. It should probably be called efficient homogenization. Real personalization is not about pathways, but about helping each and every individual student to achieve their own potential, to self-actualize, which is something no existing AI tool does. Education is also about collaboration and the other social interaction aspects of teaching and learning, which is the antithesis of the so-called personalization that so many AI in education tools claim, but mostly fail to provide. It all depends on what you want your education system to achieve. Students with lots of exam certificates, or independent, creative, and critical thinkers who are able to help society develop most effectively for the common good. That's the choice. Not only that, but almost every existing commercial AI education tool effectively adopts a behaviorist or instructionist approach. This is an extremely primitive approach to teaching and learning, which involves spoon-feeding information while avoiding failure, and which ignores more than 60 years of pedagogical development. And in so doing, they disempower teachers, turning them all too often into mere technology facilitators. Again, this misses the point, ignoring the amazing skills that human teachers have that no AI tool can replicate. It also represents the commercialization of education by stealth, as education systems increasingly rely on educational tools provided by the commercial sector, including big tech like Facebook, Google, and Amazon. That's not the world that I want. Data becomes proprietary, which is going in the opposite direction to making education open for all. These tools also undermine student agency. The student has to do what the AI requires, meaning that there's no opportunity for them to develop self-regulation skills or to self-actualize. And I worry that this is the logical conclusion of current approaches to AI in education. When a child is born, why don't we simply embed a microchip with all the world's knowledge in their brain? Or perhaps we could even do it with a pill. Now, this might seem an exaggeration, but neither is beyond the realm of possibility. Elon Musk is developing brain-based computer chips as we speak. However, again, this misses the point. It conflates education and learning with knowledge acquisition, but education is so much more than that. But even if you reject my concerns, if you think I'm making a fuss over nothing, the reality is we still don't know if any of the AI tools actually do what they claim to do. Where's the evidence? The reality is that almost no AI in education companies' products have been independently evaluated. It's all just marketing. If the AI tools are so good, where are the robust, independent, randomized control trials? There are almost none. Those that do exist have mostly been carried out in the US, which means that not only are they limited in scope, but they're also limited in applicability to other countries. Where are the robust studies from elsewhere in the world? In fact, I know of one big AI in education company that turned down an opportunity to have their product independently evaluated, even though it would have been fully funded for them. The question is, what are they trying to hide? Having said all that, what some AI tools can achieve in education is impressive. The researchers have overcome some huge technical challenges. In a sense, they've managed to climb this huge mountain. But still, the tools that they've developed are very limited when compared with human teachers and contemporary pedagogy. And frequently, they're highly questionable. All too often, they reduce student agency, they're intrusive, they're not really personalized, instead they aim to homogenize students, and they undermine teachers and teaching. They also ignore the bigger mountain of possibilities that AI might help achieve. Rather than automating poor pedagogic practices, AI developers need to leverage AI's amazing capabilities to innovate teaching and learning without compromising pedagogy or human values, to empower students and teachers, and to support inclusion and equity. Put another way, most AI in education developers focus on the symptoms rather than the causes of the problems that education faces. The symptoms are perhaps children not receiving education to which they have a human right, such as in some rural areas or developing countries. And using AI technology might help some of them. But the real issues, the causes, are the lack of qualified teachers, the lack of professional development, and the use of poor pedagogic practices, which the AI tools don't even begin to address. Putting technologies such as AI tools into settings where, for example, there aren't enough experienced teachers is a techno-solutionist approach, which perpetuates rather than solves the real problems. A short-term and exciting fix maybe, but the real problems remain. Instead of pretending that an AI tool is better than a teacher, where is the AI-powered virtual exoskeleton for teachers that helps them become super teachers? So far, there's little research into such a thing and no known commercial products. So how do we address this? How do we ensure that AI supports teaching and learning? Well, it needs educators and developers to work together. And it needs people like me to do some of the communication. In conclusion, to be clear, I'm not criticizing AI in general or AI in education. I still believe that there is some amazing potential. But I am criticizing current applications of AI in education and the way things are currently developing. In my opinion, we need to change the current trajectory. So I am saying that AI is clever, but not as clever as many people claim. AI is already having a major impact on education, and it has the potential to transform education for good, but if we're not careful, also for bad. We need to avoid simply automating poor pedagogic practices. Instead, we need to use the power of AI to develop innovative approaches to teaching and learning that address real problems. We need to empower teachers and provide them with professional development so that they can decide which AI tools might help their teaching practice and can use them effectively. We need tools that promote student agency, helping them to achieve their personal potential, to self-actualize, not to homogenize them. And we need to recognize that embedding commercial AI tools in classrooms is a commercialization of education by the back door. Finally, we need to ensure that AI in education meets real needs, is inclusive and equitable, and serves the common good. Thank you very much for listening.
Bien, pues Daniel, con esta interesante presentación llegamos al final del segundo día de Conecta Educar 2022, del que estuvimos reflexionando, discutiendo, debatiendo sobre temas que van a impactar en la educación universitaria.
Tal cual, y tenemos algunos datos. El día, sabemos, estuvo interesante, estuvo lleno de invitados, de invitadas, pero también, ojo, estará muy interesante mañana, no se lo pueden perder. Vamos a tener el tercer y último día, jornada en que hablaremos de formación profesional, conceptos, ponga atención, como upscaling y también rescaling, además de formación continua que van a dominar sin duda la agenda. Lo vamos a repetir, pero ustedes lo saben. Para revisar la jornada de hoy, miércoles, también la de ayer martes, pueden ingresar ahora mismo www.conectaeducar.com o también al YouTube de Fundación Telefónica Movistar.
Nos volvemos a encontrar mañana.
Cuídense.